So, I'm 16 years old and my parents are making me get a summer job. I did not particularly want to get a summer job, and so I put it off and I put it off and I put it off until it's so late into the summer that all the workplaces that were potentially interested in hiring unenthusiastic teenagers had already hired them. But no worries, my mom says, she has an in. Her friend's son works at the grocery store down the street. Now, I went to high school with this kid, but we did not know each other. We had never had a conversation, and I am pretty sure he did not know my name. My mom's like, that doesn't matter. Here's what you say. You go up to the hiring manager, and you're like, hi, my name is Melissa Dahl, and I have been recommended to this job by Matt Ramirez. He is a close and personal family friend. And I'm like, okay, I'll try that. By the way, I've changed his name. This is going to be embarrassing enough for one of us. So one afternoon, I take my mom's advice. I go into the grocery store. I find the hiring manager. He's helping a teenage bag boy. And I kind of thrust my application at him, and I launch into my speech. Hello, I have been recommended to this job by Matt Ramirez, a close and personal family friend. And the manager kind of looks at me, and he looks at the bag boy, and then they both look at me. And he's like, do you mean this Matt Ramirez? Yeah, that was my close and personal family friend who I was standing right next to and 100% did not notice. I actually don't remember what happened after that because I went into a kind of fear blackout. But I do know that I am embarrassed all over again reliving this memory in front of you guys. I am often embarrassed. I am not sure I actually do more embarrassing things than anybody else, although I don't know, you guys tell me. But I do think I'm maybe more sensitive to this feeling than a lot of people, and that's because I maybe have just a teensy little bit of social anxiety. That's something some of you might be familiar with too. Some statistics suggest that as many as 12% of Americans will have social anxiety disorder at some point across their lifetimes. I know that statistic off the top of my head because I'm a journalist. I cover psychological science for a living. I've been doing that for about a decade. And a couple years ago, I set out to write my first book. It is about awkwardness. They do say to write what you know. And in writing the book, my initial vision was to create this thing, to kind of create a shield between me and this feeling that I hate so much. This shield would be constructed with science. But it turned out that's not what happened. What ended up happening in the end is I totally changed my mind about the way I see these emotions. I'm talking about these self-conscious emotions, which are things like shame, embarrassment, and my favorite, awkwardness. And it's our natural instinct to resist these feelings. You know, they're unpleasant, they're uncomfortable, we don't like them. But what if we didn't resist? What if we gave them some space? What are they trying to say? I believe now that they are prompting us to ask ourselves some pretty important questions. They're asking you, who are you? How do others perceive you? And who do you want to be? These are questions we start to care about at a very young age. That's according to some interpretations of something called the mirror self-recognition test. It's a pretty simple experiment if you ever want to replicate it on your own time. All you need is a mirror, a baby, and a Post-it note. And what you do is you take a little Post-it note and you put it on top of the baby's head. Don't let them know you're doing this. And then you kind of plop the baby in front of the mirror. And according to this body of work, if the baby is much younger than 18 months, they will probably ignore all the trouble you went to, ignore all the experiments. But if they're around 2 years old, they'll do something a little bit different. They look in the mirror and they're like, hey, that baby's got a Post-it on its head. And they're like, hey, that baby is me. And then they start to show some signs of distress. You know, they'll like kind of duck their heads and try to hide from their reflection, or maybe they'll start to cry, and they'll probably take the Post-it off. What some developmental psychologists see here are early signs of self-consciousness. Now let's think about what we mean when we say that term, self-consciousness. What we're saying in this context is we're implying that the baby has a self-image. They have a picture of themselves in their head and what they look like to the rest of the world. And then they're confronted with reality, and when that doesn't match the picture of themselves in their head, it's kind of upsetting. Really, this is kind of how self-consciousness works across the lifespan. It's when we sense that there's a dissonance between the first person and the third person perspective, when the you that you have in your own head does not match up with the you the rest of the world is seeing. It's when your best intentions are not being perceived the way you meant. It turns out the psychological literature is just peppered with examples of this. We are often not coming across the way that we think we are. It's a little unsettling when all the evidence piles up. For example, there is a ton of research suggesting that we don't hear our own voices the way that other people hear them. There are also some studies suggesting that we don't necessarily see our personality traits the same way other people perceive them. And there are even some studies that suggest we literally don't see ourselves the same way strangers see us. That's something that should come as no surprise if you've ever seen a photo of yourself taken from the back. It's always a weird disappointment seeing what your hair is really doing back there. To me, all of this added up suggests that even if you're not as prone to cringing at yourself as I am, this clash of selves thing is happening anyway. You're embarrassing yourself all the time. You're just not noticing. I wish that more people would notice. I wish that more of us let this feeling in and listen to it for just a little bit. I mean, how many chances do we get to see ourselves from a third-person perspective? How many chances do we get to see ourselves from another point of view, to break out of our own point of view? If it really is true that self-consciousness is an indicator that you are not living up to your own standards for yourself, then maybe this feeling is also an opportunity to go back and address those things, to take the Post-it off of your head. Now, I don't want to go too far because it's possible to get trapped among the self-conscious feelings. To return again to social anxiety, people with social anxiety, they're so convinced of how inadequate they must look to other people that it can hold them back from living their lives. But some clinical psychologists who work with people who have social anxiety have found a way around this, and it's something that has helped me too. It's kind of a middle path through. It's a way of taking the good from this feeling and leaving the rest. It's very simple. It's just laughter. It's laughing at yourself specifically. These clinical psychologists who work with people with social anxiety, what they'll do is they ask people to think of the most embarrassing thing they can imagine doing in public. And then they're like, great, now go do it. These are real examples of some of the things people have done under this treatment. They have gone into bookstores and tracked down a bookseller and asked them, excuse me, do you have any books about farting? Or they've gone into convenience stores and picked up a pack of condoms and asked the nearest cashier, excuse me, is this the smallest size that you have? The point is not to terrify these people. The point is, lighten up. Don't take yourself so seriously. It turns out that laughter works like shame sorcery. It takes this feeling that can become toxic and it makes it gentler. It makes it more manageable. I mean, think about what it means when you tease a friend. It means that you're fond of her. It means that you're comfortable around her. It means that you see her for who she really is and you still like her. If you kind of follow that thread, embarrassment and self-consciousness, these become almost joyful feelings. They remind us of what we truly have in common, which is utter ridiculousness, just mutual human absurdity and ridiculousness. As I was working on my book, a lot of people asked me the same question. They wanted to know, how can I stop cringing at my past self? My writer friends in particular seem to want to know this. A lot of writers want to know how they can read their past work without cringing at how clumsy the work seems now. I don't really have an answer for that, or at least I know I don't have the one that they want, because the truth is, I hope you never stop cringing at yourself. You should be embarrassed, sometimes. It's kind of the best. It's the best way to find unexpected moments of joy in life. It's the best way to see how far you've come. And it's the best way to get over yourself. Thank you.